What do Gorillaz and the Travelling Wilburys have in common? Not that much, in all honesty. One is a virtual hip-hop and electronic band, and another is a supergroup whose solution to the question of who should play guitar was all five of us at the same time, of course. But what they both can be called is a side project, which Wikipedia describes as a project undertaken by one or more people already known for their involvement in another band. The first Gorillaz album came out while Damon Albarn was still active in Blur, and when they returned from their hiatus in 2009, he continued to also release music with Gorillaz concurrently. And the Travelling Wilburys featured George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne, who were all still active in their own legendary careers too. So in this video, we'll be looking at the best indie and alternative side projects, but that's not including those who just went solo after their band broke up. Sorry, Morrissey. There are also plenty from other genres we could look at too, but maybe that can be another video in the future. But first, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. First up, we have the Postal Service. The Postal Service consisted of Ben Gibbard, the frontman of Def Cab for Cutie, Jimmy Tamborello, also known as the electronic artist D&T, and Jenny Lewis from Rhino Kiley, who also went on to have a successful career of her own too. Despite the strength of the Supergroups lineup, the Postal Service only released one album, Give Up, in 2003, and it became Sub Pop's most successful release since Nirvana's Bleach. However, later that year, Def Cab for Cutie released their own landmark album, Transatlanticism, which saw them signed with Atlantic Records, and their follow-up Plans earned the first of many Grammy nominations for the band. Meanwhile, D&T remained active, and Jenny Lewis launched her solo career, with her 2014 album, The Voyager, reaching the top 10 in the US. The Postal Service briefly teased the idea of a second album, but this has been repeatedly quashed. However, the band did reunite for a 10th anniversary show in 2013, and a full tour 10 years later. Across the US and European legs of their 2023 tour, they played Give Up in full. Next, we have some Radiohead spin-offs to mention, starting with Thom Yorke's solo career. In the lead up to the release of In Rainbows, Thom Yorke released his first solo album, The Eraser, the year before. After performing some of the songs solo, he then linked up with producer Nigel Godrich to form Atoms of Peace, originally to perform songs from The Eraser, with the group named after one of the songs from the album. He recruited an all-star cast, including Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers and Joey Waronker, who had drummed with R.E.M. and Roger Waters. After releasing The King of Limbs with Radiohead in 2011, Thom then put out a full album with Atoms for Peace in 2013. It would be the group's only album though, and the following year Thom Yorke released his second solo album, Tomorrow's Modern Boxes. While Radiohead themselves have been quiet since A Moon-Shaped Pool came out in 2016, Thom Yorke's final solo album, Anima, came out in 2019, and then came yet another project, The Smile. Thom Yorke and Johnny Greenwood were united again, but this time with Sons of Kemet drummer Tom Skinner, and they made their debut in a surprise performance for the Live at Worthy Farm Glastonbury concert video in 2021. And they've been very active ever since, with their debut album, A Light for Attracting Attention, out in 2022, followed by both Wall of Eyes and Cutouts in 2024. This is alongside Thom Yorke and Johnny Greenwood's growing reputations as soundtrack composers too, with Thom Yorke writing for the films Suspiria and Confidenza, and Johnny Greenwood, whose soundtracks include There Will Be Blood, Spencer, Phantom Thread, and The Power of the Dog. The latter two both received Academy Award nominations for Best Original Score. Next is someone equally as prolific in releasing music across various projects. It's Jack White, whose first side project was the Raconteurs. The White Stripes were 5 albums in and were multiple Grammy Award winners when Jack White formed the Raconteurs after writing Steady As She Goes with Brendan Benson. They released Broken Boy Soldiers and Consolers of the Lonely in 2006 and 2008, either side of a final White Stripes album, Icky Thump, in 2007. Before the White Stripes officially broke up 4 years later in 2011, he formed another side project, The Dead Weather. This time, it was Alison Mosshart of The Kills on vocals, with Jack White on drums. They released Whorehound in 2009 and Sea of Cowards the following year. After the split of the White Stripes, Jack White launched his solo career with 6 albums since 2012. But alongside these, there was a further album from The Dead Weather in 2015, and the Raconteurs reunited for a final album in 2019 too. While we mentioned Damon Albarn's most famous side project in the intro, there was another one that he founded in the mid-2000s. Of course, it's The Good, The Bad and The Queen. Formed with The Clash's Paul Simonon on bass, Simon Tong from The Verve on guitar, and Tony Allen from Fela Kuti's band Africa 70 on drums. The group released its self-titled debut in 2007 after a few shows, and the project seemed to have finished after their performance at the 2008 Love Music Hate Racism Carnival. Simonon and Tong continued to collaborate with Damon Albarn though, appearing on the Gorillaz album Plastic Beach in 2010. However, there was a long-awaited follow-up album in 2018, Maryland. They embarked on a European tour in 2019, but Damon Albarn confirmed that their performance at Lowlands Festival in the Netherlands would be their last. Tony Allen then sadly passed away in April 2020, 2 days before the release of the last song he ever recorded, the collaboration with Gorillaz and Skepta, How Far.
Yeah, walk on brother, time to hustle for the money.
Next, it's Alex Turner, who found time during the Arctic Monkeys' rise to international success to form The Last Shadow Puppets with fellow indie heavyweights Miles Kane and James Ford. Their 2008 album, The Age of the Understatement, went straight to number 1 in the UK, and they ambitiously appeared at the Reading and Leeds Festival that year with a 16-piece orchestra. With the members returning to their respective day jobs, it wasn't until 2016 that a follow-up album, Everything You've Come to Expect, came out. Miles Kane has since supported Arctic Monkeys on tour, but there's no sign of a third album yet from the supergroup. Another project that Alex Turner was involved in was the soundtrack for Richard Ayoade's directorial debut, Submarine, in 2010. It featured Paddy Considine, who starred in the music video for Arctic Monkeys' standalone single, Leave Before the Lights Come On. Richard Ayoade had directed the music videos for the Arctic Monkeys tracks Fluorescent Adolescent, Crying Lightning and Cornerstone, as well as The Last Shadow Puppet, Standing Next to Me and My Mistakes Were Made for You, and he recruited Alex Turner, who composed 6 original indie folk-style originals.
When I saw your fingers dim in the lights.
The soundtrack itself gained plenty of critical acclaim and helped to influence Alex Turner's continued musical experimentation, to the extent where he re-recorded the Submarine track Piledriver Waltz for the next Arctic Monkeys album, Suck It and See. When it comes to projects related to Vampire Weekend, unfortunately we can't include Ezra Koenig's hip-hop group The Home Run, as that technically wasn't a side project, but let's take a moment to appreciate it anyway.
P-I-Z-Z-A-P-R-T-Y. If you got a blunt, then we can get high. If you wanna come, then pick up the phone. Don't get caught with the whack cows.
However, after the release of Vampire Weekend's debut album, bassist and future acclaimed producer Rostam Batmanglij and Wes Miles from Ra Ra Riot picked up a previous collaborative project, Discovery, and finally released the project's only full-length LP, called LP. A departure from their trademark baroque pop sounds, the duo went full electropop, and even put together this version of the Jackson 5's I Want You Back. The LP would be the final release from Discovery though, as the duo would concentrate more fully on their respective bands. Next, we have the collaboration between Danger Mouse and James Mercer from The Shins, Broken Bells. Danger Mouse had already gained international acclaim for both his solo work, which included this Beatles and Jay-Z mashup, The Grey Album. Plus, he'd won a couple of Grammys as part of Gnarls Barkley as well. Meanwhile, James Mercer had earned a Grammy nomination of his own for the Shins' third album, Wincing the Night Away. As a duo, Broken Bells released their self-titled debut album in 2010. It reached number 7 in the US Billboard chart and lost out to the Black Keys Brothers in the 2011 Grammy for the Best Alternative Music Album, although Danger Mouse himself won the Grammy for Best Producer for his work on that same album, as well as the Broken Bells album. After further albums by Danger Mouse and the Shins, Broken Bells returned for their follow-up album in 2014. After the Disco reached an even higher position of number 5 in the US, plus number 12 in the UK too. Broken Bells wouldn't return for a while though, with Danger Mouse continuing to earn acclaim as a producer, including finally winning the prestigious Album of the Year Grammy in 2017 with Adele's 25. The Shins had slowed down their output, but still released a further album in the meantime, 2017's Heartworms. But then in 2022, Broken Bells finally returned with Into the Blue to plenty of positive acclaim. After bursting onto the scene with their Mercury Prize-winning debut album, all 3 members of the XX have been able to have stints exploring solo careers, but it was Jamie XX whose solo project really enjoyed a significant amount of success. Instead of immediately looking to capitalise on the hype generated by the XX's debut album, Jamie XX continued his work with remixes and released We're New Here, a 13-track remix album of Jill Scott-Heron's last album, I'm New Here. The remix album would be the last release in Jill Scott-Heron's lifetime, and it received a positive response from critics. Jamie XX continued to grow in his reputation as a producer, working on the Drake and Rihanna track Take Care, as well as some Radiohead remixes and a track for Alicia Keys. After a triumphant follow-up album with the XX in 2012, he returned to focusing on his solo career and finally released his own debut album in 2015. In Colour received a rating of 9.3 from Pitchfork, who then ranked it at number 25 in their list of the 200 best albums of the 2010s. It also earned Jamie a further Mercury Prize nomination, plus a nomination for the Best Dance/Electronic Album at the 2016 Grammys. That year, he also composed the score for the ballet Tree of Codes for the Manchester International Festival. The XX released their third album, I See You, in 2017, which was later followed by solo albums from Oliver Sim and Romy over 2022 and 2023, both of which featured production from Jamie XX. Jamie himself finally followed up with his own solo album, In Waves, in 2024. Fittingly, it included performances from Romy and Oliver Sim, plus collaborations with Panda Bear, Robin, and the Avalanches. Julian Casablancas has a couple of inclusions now. Firstly, his somewhat underappreciated solo album from 2009, Phrases for the Young. After a frantic few years with the Strokes, releasing 3 albums over 4 years, the band took a hiatus in 2007 to take what they described as a much-needed break. In 2009, the hiatus was officially ended, and work had begun on what would be their next album, Angles. But at this time, Julian Casablancas was also working on his own solo material, with less focus on guitars and more influence from new wave and electronica. Phrases for the Young came out at the end of 2009 to a mostly lukewarm response, although it has since received something of a renaissance in recent years. After the release of Angles and Come Down Machine with the Strokes, he linked up with Daft Punk on Instant Crush, which you could argue was a more successful version of the sound he explored for Phrases of the Young. Afterwards, he linked up again with some of the members of his backing band from his solo tour, and formed what was originally known as Julian Casablancas and the Voidz. Their first album, Tyranny, came out in 2014, followed by Virtue under the revived band name of just The Voidz. After a triumphant return to the Strokes with 2020's The New Abnormal, which won a Grammy for the Best Rock Album, a further Voidz album came out in 2024, although the cover artwork for Like All Before You received a backlash for its use of AI, a choice which Julian Casablancas defended, stating it was the image they most preferred from the options they had. Next are some very entwined projects and artists, so you'll have to bear with me. First off, we'll take a look at some of Conor Oberst's side projects.
This is the first day of my life. I'm glad I didn't die before I met you.
Mostly known for fronting Bright Eyes, as well as for his solo career, Conor Oberst has kept himself busy with plenty of other projects over the years. After Commander Venus with Tim Kasher, he would go on to form the legendary emo band Cursive. Conor Oberst went on to play drums for Park Ave. Their album When Jamie Went to London, We Broke Up is actually the story of the band. But before the album had been put together, they linked up with another cult legend of alt rock, the Wrens, for a split single. After that, Conor Oberst concentrated most of his attention towards Bright Eyes, with Fevers and Mirrors and I'm Awake It's Morning gaining 9 and 8.7 scores from Pitchfork respectively. However, in 2002, he also released a debut album with his punk rock project Desaparecidos, which was eventually followed up in 2015 with Payola. After a couple of other minor side projects such as Monsters of Folk, he then linked up with Phoebe Bridgers to form Better Oblivion Community Centre. They released the project's only album in 2019 and received resounding praise from critics.
Sick of being honest, I'll die like Dylan Thomas, a seizure on the barroom floor.
There has been no signs of a follow-up, but Conor Oberst collaborated with Phoebe Bridgers for a few tracks on her breakthrough album Punisher. And to focus on Phoebe Bridgers now, Better Oblivion Community Centre wasn't her first notable side project. Boygenius, the supergroup consisting of her, Julian Baker, and Lucy Dacus, released their first EP in 2018. Julian Baker and Lucy Dacus then also joined Conor Oberst in providing vocals for Punisher, followed by their own subsequent albums, Little Oblivions and Home Video, also featuring guest vocals from each of their Boygenius bandmates. The growing success of each member's main careers meant it took until 2023 for Boygenius to release their first full-length album. The record was an unequivocal success. After topping the UK chart and reaching number 4 in the US, NME and The Independent ranked it top of their 2023 Album of the Year lists. And even more impressively, it won 3 Grammy Awards for Best Alternative Music Album, plus Best Rock Song and Best Rock Performance for Not Strong Enough. Plus, they won the Brit Award for International Group of the Year, beating heavyweights Foo Fighters, Blink-182 and Paramore. They followed up with an EP called The Rest later that year, which included Voyager, which was co-written with Conor Oberst, just to go full circle on this section. To finish off, we have an honourable mention. They're technically not side projects, as the bands only ever released music, while the main project they spawned from weren't releasing music, but they're worth a mention. After the Libertines imploded, following Pete Doherty's ongoing struggles with addiction, culminating in him being arrested for burgling his bandmate Carl Barât's flat, the two went their separate ways. And so, we have the bands that arose from the fallout of the breakup of the Libertines, starting with Dirty Pretty Things.
Bang, bang, you're dead. Oh, so easily dead.
Carl Barât formed Dirty Pretty Things, who had some success with the single Bang Bang You're Dead from 2006's Waterloo to Anywhere. They followed up with Romance at Short Notice in 2008, but split later that year after a final show at the Astoria 2 with the Paddingtons. Carl Barât released a solo album of his own in 2010, but at this time the Libertines had made a sensational return to Reading and Leeds Festival. The other Libertines spin-off band was Pete Doherty's Babyshambles, who did in fact continue to release music after the Libertines got back together for their Reading and Leeds Festival show, but they began to wind down before the Libertines' 2015 comeback album, Anthems for Doomed Youth. But after the initial breakup of the Libertines, Babyshambles were immediately successful, with Fuck Forever, Kilimanjaro and Albion all top 10 hits in the UK. However, Pete Doherty himself was continuing to spiral and gained a growing reputation for being unable to perform or even show up for their scheduled shows. After 2005's Down in Albion, they released Shotters Nation in 2007, and their final album, Sequel to the Prequel, in 2013, but have not yet returned since the Libertines' comeback. However, Pete Doherty has continued to release music as a solo artist. After 2009's Grace/Wasteland, he released albums in 2016, 2019, and most recently, a collaboration with French composer Frédéric Lowe in 2022 called The Fantasy Life of Poetry and Crime. He also has an album due out later in 2025 called Felt Better Alive.
I dredged the mouth of the Humber, felt better alive.
And so that's it for this video. But if there were any side projects that I didn't include, then please let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe.